All right, guys, I'm gonna get going. So yeah, first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural edition of our South African Schools Strength and Conditioning Coach Forum. I think with the technology we have today, it's really great that we can share information, bounce off ideas, and really look at making some kind of uniformity in strength and conditioning in the school setting. I definitely think over time it will make a really good impact in the quality of sports that we produce. So yeah, thank you to all of you for joining. There are quite a few people who have made apologies. I think a lot of people do have commitments that they have. So what we'll do is we will record the video, and then I'll publish a YouTube link, and then we'll make it available for everyone to have a look at thereafter. We've had about 50 people from 50 schools that have joined. So yeah, it's a really good response, and I'm very excited. In terms of the purpose of the forum, obviously the sharing knowledge is quite key. So with the topic that we're going to speak about today, we're going to have a couple of people lead off with a question, and then if you would like to contribute to what's been said, then if you just put an indication in the comments box, and then we will give you a chance to elaborate or give your opinion on what has been spoken about. So yeah, I'll reiterate that a bit later once we've had a chance to sort of get into the swing of things. I'd like to thank LifeMax. It's a South African company that deal with a variety of equipment and sports performance products. I'm going to be playing a short video just to show you what they do. And over the course of the next few months, we're going to look at trying to give companies opportunities, or companies that are linked to our industry, an opportunity to show you what products they have, and hopefully it will bring a benefit and value to your guys' programs going forward. I'd also like to thank Harvest Table. They actually have given us some product to do a little draw. So straight after the video, I will do a little draw, and then if someone's going to win, it's a Harvest Table Power Repair protein shake. So that's really nice of them. So without further ado, I'm going to play the video from LifeMax. If you guys want to make appointments with them to chat about their products, you can get in touch with me. Otherwise, I'll put you in contact with either Brian or Graham, who are involved with the company. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. All right, can you guys see my screen?
No.
Not yet. Just hold on. How about now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just find out where this is.
Yeah, Bo.
Okay, let's give it a go. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our dedicated team at LifeMax use our 25 years of experience in partnering with the world's most desired life science, exercise medicine, human movement, and sports science brands to bring you leading solutions for measuring, testing, monitoring, and improving human performance. Our sports performance solutions bring an advanced scientific approach and intervention that will empower you to improve athletic performance and assist athletes in effectively reaching their sport-specific goals, no matter what level they are currently at. In today's digital era, human motion is mathematically described in terms of displacement, distance, velocity, acceleration, speed, and time. With our movement science systems, you are able to measure and give real-time feedback on the movements of the whole body or any part thereof. The evaluation and care of patients and athletes is covered by our integrated exercise medicine and cardiopulmonary diagnostic solutions, delivering accurate and detailed analysis that can be shared and relied on over and over again. Body measurement is a prerequisite in human performance. Our body composition and anatomical measuring solutions cater for all your body management and analysis requirements, providing detailed insight into how these measures impact fitness, health, wellness, and nutritional status. Our injury management systems include powerful rehabilitation biofeedback programs that provide insight into both mechanical and physiological load responses. You can also capture and compare the movements of multiple joints and angles and provide valuable feedback on how evidence-based assessments reduce injuries and speed up return to play. LifeMax includes training and familiarization with each system we deliver. And to keep you at the forefront of the industry, we also offer basic, intermediary, and advanced education courses that can be tailored to any specific needs. We offer backup, service, and support to ensure that your new product gives years of quality performance. Add a new dimension to your business with our market-leading products that add value to your work in sports, nutrition, health, fitness, and exercise medicine. Please visit our website or follow us on social media platforms for more information.
All right, yeah, guys. So if you are keen to look at some of LifeMax's products, just you can either look at the website or I can put you in touch with Brian or Graham. So the next thing I'm going to do is just go do the harvest table draw quickly. So I've got a draw generator. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and then we're going to do the draw. Okay. All right, let's have a look here. Can you guys see the generator?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to get a number, and then we're going to look at the Google Sheet. So the number is 41, and just go down a little list here. Number 41 is Des Ryan from Setanta College. They're actually an institution that provide S&C courses. So yeah, I think Des is based overseas, but we'll see if we can get the product to him. All right. So guys, as I mentioned, today, I think importantly, it's a good thing that we can discuss about the challenges of night. I got some really good responses via the Google form, and I've picked out 5 that I think are really important and also applicable to an applied environment. So we're going to get stuck straight into them. I think Lawrence, I don't think Lawrence is here just yet. There is a topic that I wanted to chat about with him, but we'll start with Jared, if that's possible. Jared, you're good to go.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Jared, would you mind just giving us a brief introduction as to who you are and how your career's progressed, and then I'll shoot with the question.
Yeah, 100%. So firstly, thanks, Marla, for the opportunity. And basically, I've been in the high performance environment for a number of years. My background is traditionally coming from pro football. So I was with a pro football team for around 8 years, and recently just stepped into the school high performance environment. So very different change of scenery for me, and I guess change of pace, but also a very different challenge. So looking forward to that. Educationally, I have my master's in exercise science. I'm educated as a biokineticist, but obviously high performance is more of my passion. And yeah, I guess new frontier for me is school S&C and how we kind of develop the athletes of the future.
For sure, yeah. I know St. John's are very lucky to have you, and I'm certainly looking forward to the difference you're going to make there. So, in terms of the question I have for you, Jared, workload monitoring in the schooling environment is a challenging aspect of strength and conditioning, often with limited resources available to be completely accurate in the execution of a plan. Often we see athletes playing multiple sporting codes as well as club and provincial commitments. How do you go about ensuring players are hitting accurate loads, both in the gym and on the sporting field? And as an add-on question towards the end, if you could discuss, are there any monitoring tools that are cost-effective that you think can be valuable in a schooling environment?
Cool. So if you don't mind, obviously, I've just kind of put a few points down that I think would be quite helpful with everybody. So I guess just to start off, I think every school is different. I think everyone can agree with that. So St. John's, for example, is a 3-term school. And within those 3 terms, every student is required to play at least one sport. And we have sometimes students playing 2. So that takes away from some of their training time and our ability to, I guess, monitor their load a little bit more accurately. So for me, historically, load management always came down to physical load. So we would look at what someone is doing from a physical aspect in the gym or on the field, like you mentioned. I think for me personally, coming to this environment, I look at things a little bit differently. I look at students or student athletes more from a holistic perspective. So first thing for me is probably the mental load. And so we have students that have extremely taxing academic programs as well as cultural programs. They're driven quite hard at different schools that are more academically inclined. And then obviously we tackle the physical load, what we're doing on the field or in the gym. And then beyond that is a social load as well, what's happening in the home environment, in the social environment with their friends or loved ones or people that they hold quite dear. So I think it's more of a holistic viewpoint on load management and how we deal with that student athlete. I think for me, one of the key tips, and it's such a free, I guess, that we've used over the years is just asking student athletes, how do they feel on any given day? If we're looking at the holistic approach, someone might say, I have some family trouble, or my partner broke up with me, for example. That has an impact on their ability to perform and their load, basically, at the end of the day. So I think that's really important to build that relationship and connection. And of course, it's free. So I mean, it's an easy tool to implement. Looking at pro teams and their budgets, their team focus, they can pump money into assessing load with their athletes. So they'll have tech from GPSs, heart rate monitors. They can do fatigue monitoring or monitoring. They have AMS systems and platforms. So that's very different. Where schools, the priorities are very different. It's more about infrastructure, staff, and the students. And let's be honest, tech and platforms are not really at the forefront of what they're going to be pumping money into. So I think to answer your question, when it comes down to load management, from the gym environment, something that we're trying to implement at the moment is doing regular kind of physical testing throughout the year. So we want to create an annual plan as opposed to looking at sports individually and then doing testing for those sports. So we want to have a centralized testing battery that we do 6, 7, 8 times throughout the year. And we want to look at a student athlete developing on an annual basis. So if we take what everyone would call a grade 8 learner coming into a high school environment, going all the way through to matric, you've got a 5-year window of how you develop that athlete or that student athlete. And that's basically longer than an Olympic cycle. So you have such a rich environment to kind of develop that person, and even beyond school, maybe going into pro sport. So that's basically what we're trying to create as a central testing battery and a database that every coach has access to, and then we can monitor students long term. So I think that gym testing is really important. From a field testing battery, when we get to how we're hitting our loads, I think it is very difficult. Number one, because you have multiple sporting codes going at the same time. You have multiple teams in those sporting codes. And obviously from a manpower perspective, for example, there are 4 of us at St. John's and we all have a different responsibility. So we can't monitor the load ourselves on a daily basis. And I think that's where coach buy-in and coach education and kind of the coaches being part of the load monitoring system is really important, where they can give feedback, they can give reports on how the sessions went. And I think if we look at historically, if we look at the oldest trick in the book on how we monitor load, It's straightforward. It's a session RPE, it's a session duration, and that gives us training load in arbitrary units. And if we can look at that and we can get coaches to accumulate that data and give us a daily report or a weekly report, and we do the rest, we can see how the student athletes are doing long term. So basically, some tools that I've picked up on over the last couple of years, and I think everyone might find quite beneficial because they don't really cost much or they don't cost anything at all, would be a wellness tool, a wellness questionnaire called Readiness Wellness Monitoring that can be found on the Apple Store. I'm not sure if it's available through Android, but that's an individual wellness questionnaire. I think there's 5 or 6 questions that the athlete can basically enter. The only difficulty is that's device bound. So if it's on an iPad, for example, the athletes would have to come in. So if they're coming into a gym environment, for example, or pre-training, they would fill that data in, and you can basically see how they're doing long term. Another tool to use would be Metric VBT. That was recommended to me by Ignatius Laubscher. That's also free on the App Store. And that's basically a video tool to assess velocity-based training through the Olympic lifts. And I guess my last kind of point or tip would be to try and invest as we as professionals in data analytics and data visualization courses. And why that's important, I think that's where our performance is going, is how we present data, because we can collect it as much as we want, but how do we present it? How do we make the most out of that data? And how do we kind of give the coaches tools in the most visually appealing way to make the correct decision? So I know there's a lot of courses on that on LinkedIn, so they don't cost that much, and it's obviously it's really available to everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, Jared, there's some really interesting insight there. Especially the RPEs, it's quite quick and easy, and you can start developing a bit of a profile. Obviously, incorporating that, you can, what I've seen is obviously sleep is quite an important thing in terms of recovery, and you can monitor those sort of things, and sort of in your RPE will include those different aspects. I think it's probably the best sort of method you can use without limited to no sort of equipment available. I just wanted to comment also on your centralized testing battery. I think that is a really good one, because if you keep changing your testing battery, it's obviously time consuming. If once your sort of athletes, they know exactly what they're going to be doing, it takes a lot less time to get through. And obviously time is limited with these athletes, which is something that we're going to chat on about a bit later. So guys, just for those of you that joined a bit late, if you want to make comments or share your opinion on each of the topics, just indicate in the chat. So on Jared's topic, is there anyone now who wants to sort of add on to that, or can we move on to topic number 2? Okay, I think we'll move on to topic number 2. Thanks so much for that, Jared. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Getting on to our second topic, and it's directed at Lawrence. I see Lawrence. Lawrence, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was a little bit late. Had a bit of a struggle getting on, but sure, what an honor and privilege to be able to address such formidable people. So thanks a lot. Sorry about the late join.
No stress at all. Lawrence, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief background about your working history and how your career's progressed so far.
Cool. So, yes, finished at SACS, coached from about grade 8 while playing, or end of grade 9 at a junior stuff in the boarding house, and then went to UCT.
Meeting has stopped.
Went to
This meeting is being recorded.
NMMU, where I did human movement science and then sports science after, while coaching at Grey and working with the under 19 and under 21 EP Academy with Kempson and Nodis. Luckily, I was basically a glorified water boy, just being able to help out for those honest times, and just soaking up as much as I could. And then started out head of sports science and strength and conditioning at St Andrews in 2016 for a 3-year contract, which progressed into a permanent contract as director of performance, and then separately housemaster and a holistic view. But yeah, I've been very lucky and blessed. But yeah, that's a short background. Sorry, I'll keep it sweet.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Lawrence. With regards to the question that I wanted to ask you, so basically, is Lawrence still there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So the question that I've got for you is, within the schooling environment, we often have limited time to work with athletes. To find the balance between academics, team training, and work in the gym is a major challenge that we face. How would you prioritize your approach towards using the limited time that you have with your athletes to bring about the greatest benefit towards performance on the field?
Yeah, so it's a tough one, all encompassing to try and nail it down. It basically comes to time. So a lot of stuff has been mentioned. I've got a short 5-6 slide PowerPoint that I've got. If guys do want to have a look at it while I'm talking, I just need permission to share.
No problem. I think I did create permission in advance, so give it a go and let's see if it pops up.
It says host is disabled, attendee screening sharing.
Okay, but, just give me 1 sec, and I think it's reset back. Okay, multiple participants. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I've got all participants on. Who can share my slide?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
It's still saying that.
Oh, got it. I've got it now. So just give me know you can see what's happening. Okay, so trying to keep it short and sweet. It's basically in everything I do, I want to be the staff member, adult, housemaster, or coach that I wish I had when I was a kid, and that comes down to honesty. With limited time and most bang for your buck, there are multiple things, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but the answer is it always depends. So what sport or sports specificity of training, off-season, pre-season, in-season, how much time does the athlete have? And most importantly to me, and most SNCs I've spoken to, it comes down to the relationship between athletes and the head of sports code and our own personal ego, everyone else's ego that ultimately relies in buy-in, which, whatever dynamic prioritization plan you've got, they're not going to do it. It doesn't work. So we're in a pretty fortunate position. But the thing I struggle with the most personally would be a under 15 athlete who's finishing. Under 16 coach says, hey, I need you to pick up a bit of weight. He's also a cricketer, so we don't want to decrease his range of motion, but he's also plays polo. So the amount of swimming he's doing is going to struggle. How do you answer that from a theoretical versus a practical perspective? Dunning-Kruger effect, like finish varsity, Pico, Mount Stupid. We can get into all of that, but it's where do I personally start? And we might all have different opinions here, but it's what do I need to do and what are the training demands, how I can create that for the athlete. Not having bodybuilders, but a student athlete that's robust and injury resilient, and starting with the most demanding sport. So most of them have similar base components, but from a perspective of non-contact, contact, and collision sport, build up from there. Knowing the athlete, so what's their timetable like specifically? So here's something I send out most years, but here's an example of the end of this season. So I know the time. They send me back something from a while ago, their time plan, and I'll put out a program. But getting into like specifically most bang for your buck, sorry, this was for master students. I just want to, paralysis by analysis. I know you mentioned that earlier.
Sure.
Short. Okay, those are our testing criteria. Most bang for your buck would be this one. If a kid's so busy and he can't do much, he's doing his aerobic and anaerobic conditioning for multiple sports codes. We need to have an umbrella term to try and manage these kids, that they're not burning out from all perspectives and they're performing in their primary field, which is in the classroom. But my personal most bang for my buck would be an elastic band resisted run, and how do I progress that or regress that depending on the athlete. As we can see here on our far left, it can be in a running style. If we're doing squats, it's a symmetrical movement. How specific, or what's the specificity of that to on-field running for athletics, running up and down for cricket, and we can progress that to a contact or non-contact, or even go as far as collision. How do we make robust injury-resistant athletes. So bottom left, it'll start out with single leg hops, reverse walks, forward running, and even progress it to full contact, where I can maximize the resistance, so they're working hard, low speed of collision, so there's a low risk of injury, and incorporating these fundamental movement skills, catching, passing during everything. So in the middle of their gym session, for example, they might be doing catches and swapping things out. It's balanced, but the answer to every question is it always depends. Yeah, so I actually haven't been able to see what's happening here. So that's short, sharp, and sweet, and I think that is 5 minutes 42 seconds, so over your time cap. but yeah, please shoot questions.
Yeah, thanks.
And if I can learn from you guys, it makes it better.
I think in that sense, in terms of the limited time, is keeping it as simple as possible. Obviously, with cross codes, it can get a bit tangled up. Let's say a guy who's playing cricket and then a guy's rugby in second term. It can get quite complicated. So I think, yeah, keeping it as simple as possible and looking at the demands of your sport. We have a question from Richard. Richard, do you want to fire away with what you want to direct either towards the question or towards what Lawrence has already said?
Hi there, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, so my question comes down to something you said in the beginning, Lawrence, about like the under 15 groups. So for me, the under 15 group seems to be like a key area because they're no longer juniors, but they're not seniors. Some kids have started to go through some more sort of testosterone-driven physiological change. So you get a bit of pushback when you're trying to, or when I'm trying to get them to focus more on maybe some sort of technique stuff like you're talking about with resisted running or whatever it is, because they're still at that stage where we can kind of drive speed development and build a bit of aero into them and anaerobic work. Have you got anything specific around that like when you're getting pushback where guys are going, well, we need to get bigger? What I tend to try and do, I guess, is I try and sort of mold a little bit of the strength work and maybe a bit more strength endurance into sets where I'm doing a bit more power or technique based stuff. But for me, that's like it's a key age group where you can really, if you can get the buy-in, you can get them to take ownership of their own development, and it stands you in good stead for the next 3 years when they start developing in the gym. You got any other key things there that you are happy to share?
I'm always happy to share absolutely everything. But you've hit the nail on the head there in your question and answer. You're doing the right stuff already. From a sharing perspective, it's being vulnerable or being honest. So if I mix the theoretical background of the studies with the practical of being the player, like I've had the coaches who say you need to put on weight, bud, or I've had the guys who, your rugby contract's on and you don't meet your performance criteria and they're $500 off your pay salary at the end of a contract, or skin folds, your bench is under, your sprint repeats under, and those kind of things add up. So yeah, answers always, it depends. So like, what's the athlete? And it comes to knowing that individual, like what makes him tick, and that comes down to relationships. Because in the absence of trust, this kid's going to assume his subconscious bias. So, what's the hierarchy in the coaching system? Is it director performance, head of rugby, under 16 coach, S&C under each one? Who's this kid's pulling towards? Where's the stress? By no means do I think I've got all the answers, and if I ever get to a point where I think I've 100% lost. I learn more from under 14s every now and then in how do I get their buy-in to what I'm saying. And it could be, one of my senior athletes having a verbal cue that the guy listens to, but it builds into the back end of the previous speaker talking about specific testing criteria. And if he believes that what I'm telling him is going to help him, he's going to have that intrinsic buy-in and he'll listen. But yeah, it comes down to relationship and trust. But I mean, you pretty much answered your question already. I've got scenarios of kids in my head from a, Craven Week level or Craven Week level who express stresses, or, from my position of privilege, it says, I've got to put on 5 to 10 kilograms, and he comes from an underprivileged school where he's on a scholarship, and the guys are spending more money in a weekend than his family earns in a month. Like, he's going to have more pressure to lead one way than another. But it's really difficult, and each and every one of us have so much influence that I don't think we realize until, a bit of hindsight. I don't think I've answered your question. I'm so sorry.
No, but I mean, I think it's really the type of thing that's more, I guess, of an open discussion, because it is an unanswerable question, I guess, when we're dealing with so many kids. But I've absolutely found as well that when you get a coach that I mean, I've got one under 15 coach in a specific sport at the moment who's engaging with me a lot. And all of a sudden, we're getting so much excitement going on, and the boys have certainly got buy-in. And so the challenge really, like one challenge we've had at the moment was trying to get some of our cricketers fit now in the third term before they go into fourth term, because we've not had a really strong element there in the past. I'm very new to this role, but at the school, but the pushback was always around, okay, well, half of these kids are all the good ones, generally the best in the team, are playing indoor hockey as well, and league will be at night, and so they may have to travel 50 k's to get to the Astro, and they're only getting home at 10:30 at night. So with those kids, I mean, now I'm just going to give some feedback in case anyone thinks this is a reasonable idea they've had a problem with, I guess, but is I mean, we're running in our PE, we're trying to get a condition block in for half of our PE period, and if it's on a day where those kids are doing like a nighttime a league game, I'll have to just ask the group, look, who's playing hockey tonight? If I don't know who it is, again, I'm still new and I'm learning these kids, and I try and get them just to sort of do maybe half the session, have a look at them, see how they're feeling, and come with the honesty side of it and say to them, look, but you need to make sure you've got resources here. So I want to pull you out of the leg stuff so you can still run, and go and do some band stretching, and then let me know the next day how you feel. So at least I know, was he on his threshold? Were they below it? And I guess you get to know the kids in the squads who you can trust their feedback. So the RPE scale, that makes sense. I haven't started using it with this group yet, but someone mentioned it earlier, and it really is, I guess, one of the easiest ways to get some feedback. But failing that, you cherry pick 1 or 2 good guys out of a group, and it should give you a pretty reasonable indication as to how everyone else is doing. So that's a bit of my feedback there. And then the last thing I had to say was just on overhead strength. We've generally found if we can get that right, the shoulder injuries on the rugby side specifically kind of reduce. I mean, I'm just going with trying to get strength endurance with bands and maybe light poles and stuff overhead with the guys at this stage and under 15. But I kind of feel like if I can do some education side around that with them, and then the next year they start pushing the weights a little bit more, it kind of helps a bit with buy-in. There's a lot.
Listen, reach out to me and I'll share everything I've got. I was lucky enough to have some guys like Simon Thomas with the Crusaders who shared stuff with me. There's a sharing mentality in the S&Cs in New Zealand, because they want to make everyone better so they get better. So I want to try and create that as best as possible here, because their job's making All Blacks. Our job's like the Bulls have to beat the Lions, and the Lions got to beat the Stormers for that kind of setup. But just on your RPE thing, I do have a potential suggestion for that. Just now that I've thought about it, it's where on multiple scales. I mean, you could go the route of RPE. So if you're looking at RPE duration and then get a spit out per week and then monitor that by load. If you go the GPS stats, but if the guys don't have GPS data, the easiest way from a training perspective would be, I'll share the norms that I've got per rugby or hockey, like what a schoolboy level or what I've recorded at a schoolboy level it's between 3.5 to 4.5 Ks in a half. The highest I've ever had is a crazy athlete with a scrum off who could 9 something in a whole game. But our normative testing data, the only thing I really look at would be a real big thing from a strength to weight ratio perspective. 5-minute row and standing broad jump, sprint repeat and bronco time. And that's the big one, but that's all relative. But if you don't have the GPS data, my big thing is if I'm looking at a preseason plan, and it's ironic here because it was planning for 2020 and then COVID hit us all pretty hard. It's dose. So the same way if you go to a doctor, he's going to say take, I don't know, paracetamol, 500 milligrams, 2 pills, 3 times, whatever. In knowing what is needed in the sport, so let's say rugby, if we look at this, I think I've labeled it session 2. So saying like 150 meter run where it's 100 turn, 50 is a multiple angle turn, and my fatties have to do that in, I think I've highlighted here, 30 seconds. So that's 5 meters a second. And the fast guy's got to do it in 25. So you're looking at 6 meters per second. So we can prescribe distance and speed and be quite precise in that. If they're not doing it, it takes away that subjective versus objective component, which could help. And I think but anyway, sorry, I'm hogging. I'm off. Me cancel this guy.
That's interesting. I mean, I think we'll have GPS for our kind of main squad, but to be able to have something quantifiable for the rest of them to kind of at least aim at also helps, so I appreciate that. That's useful.
Yeah. So I mean, get the buy-in and say, this is what's expected from a senior athlete. I mean, who is your biggest role model at school? You under 14, it's the matric is playing first team. Yeah. But I must say, in a boarding school environment, I've got a massive asset in. We've got access to them more, so we can do morning sessions at a time where they're not driving in from different places. We can control the diet 100% because we are 90% boarding school. But it's got its perks and cons depending on how your SWOT analysis works. But reach out to me afterwards. I'll share whatever I've got. I'm happy to help. Makes us all better at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence and Richard, for sort of developing on that topic of time. I think we shifted the direction a bit, but I think those are all things that are really applicable to the industry, and it's really valuable. What I will do is afterwards I'll make a summary on things that are said, and I'll make it available to everyone as well as the recording. So guys, thanks so much for that. The next topic, funnily enough, is specifically about creating buy-in. Obviously, buy-in is a tough thing. Without that buy-in, you're not going to get anyone to follow your program. So I know Rian was going to be a little bit late. Rian, are you there?
How's it? Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Rian, thanks so much for joining us. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief introduction on your background, and then we'll dig straight into your question.
Yeah, how's it, everyone? Good to be here. Good to get to chat to a big group of SNCs. I don't think this has ever really happened before. I've never really heard of anything like this happening before. So my name's Rian. I'm 24. I'm one of the SNCs here at Paul Roos, one of 2. Because we're only 2 this year. We got brought on board this year. We're working with multiple sports. Got the rugby. I'm working with under 14s and under 16s. I've had my first full season with them, joining in Jan. Hockey from 14 to 19, we worked with majority of the season, and then water polo and cricket we recently started working with. I myself am an old boy from Paul Roos. I joined in my grade 10 year, coming from a school in Cape Town. And then, that's from there I went on to study sports science, did my honors in performance sport at University of Stellenbosch. And now after that, did my internship did a internship at SAS here in Stellenbosch, and I'm currently doing my master's in performance coaching through Setanta College and Irish University. Yeah, that's all about me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rian. So the question I have to you, Ian, is as follows. Creating buy-in to a system is an extremely important factor in creating a successful team environment. With regards to athletes and youngsters often watching questionable content they see on social media and YouTube, how do you go about creating buy-in to your philosophy and programming? I know Paul Roos has a really rich culture history, especially in their rugby program. What aspects do you think are key in creating an effective training culture in the gym?
I think it's a great question. Obviously, being an old boy, I remember from training sessions, I played rugby myself, and training sessions were always a kind of like, if you get left behind, your teammates will pick you up. It wasn't leaving each other behind. So there was a big sense of brotherhood within not only the rugby, but within all sports. And I think that kind of motivated everyone to just keep moving forward. And just to go into the buy-in, I think social media has definitely affected buy-in hugely. I think athletes always begin to question any kind of programming that doesn't include a 1 rep max deadlift or a bench press or bicep curls for 100 reps. Or so I've tried to counter this by always having an open door policy with my athletes. So I encourage them to ask questions. I'll give them an opportunity to ask if they understand once I've explained a block or a set, and just try and give them some kind of idea as to why we are doing what we're doing. I found that once I've given them reasoning or the outcome that I want them to achieve, or the adaptation that I want them to get, they know what the end goal is. So they tend to just commit a little bit more. And I think also just being open with the athletes also builds a lot of trust. I think somebody mentioned before, one of the biggest factors regarding buy-in, I think if they don't trust the coach, or they don't trust the coaching environment, they won't have a big buy-in. And I think being honest with athletes also goes a long way. I mean, I always try and prep my athletes if we're going into a preseason block where we need to kind of lift the running load a little bit just to get that kind of adaptation. I'll tell them, like, this next block is going to be hard. We're going to get the lungs burning, but rather get them burning now than getting them burning in the first game in the first 5 minutes. And I think that they kind of get to prepare themselves as well for that. So kind of let them know what they're in for, get them on board, get them to fully commit, pick each other up. We've always got the saying, hard work pays off, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. But I think we must also they must also know how to work smartly as well. I mean, you get a lot of guys coming in on their own time, trying to get a 1 RM deadlift or bicep curling for 30 minutes. And I always try and ask the question to them, well, is this going to be beneficial to your sport? I mean, obviously in a sport like rugby, there's always space for hypertrophy work. And so to kind of get guys on board and even more buy-in, I kind of opened up these extra sessions in the evenings. I work in the hostel here at Paul Roos as well. So I've got a bit of time in the evenings to come kind of open up the gym and kind of got the guys in to maybe work on more individual goals. So guys who need to maybe lose a bit of fat or pick up a bit of muscle, try and get them more on board and more buy-in through working on their individual stuff, and created a huge buy-in. And I kind of got more out of my team sessions as well. They weren't really doubling up on exercises or squatting 3 times a week or twice a week, so I could kind of manage what they were doing, which was quite nice. And I guess, my key points, I think social media has had a huge impact on the buy-in. We can try and counter it on being clear with the outcomes and the goals for the athletes, encourage questions, make sure you can answer them. I think by doing that, we can kind of create smarter athletes. So guys who maybe come in on their own, they've done their mobility before, they come in, they know they need to maybe recover on this day because tomorrow's a heavy day. And I think, yeah, always be open to your athletes, build their trust, and be honest going forward.
Awesome, Rian. Yeah, it's a really great answer, and I can most certainly relate to a lot of the things that you said. I definitely share the same sentiments with regards to teaching the athlete the why. I think if you can completely show them how a certain exercise will affect their performance on the field in a way that they can understand, I definitely think that it helps. Taking the time to also, as you say, get to know that athlete, show them that you care, show them that you're not there just to sort of pick up your paycheck. If you're really sort of getting involved with going the extra mile towards making sure that they can be the best that they can be, I think that it will really go a long way. Guys, you wanted to add on to that? Okay. Just on that topic of buy-in, there's a book that I read by someone called Brett Bartholomew. It's called Conscious Coaching: The Art and Science of Building Buy-in. It's a really good book. What he does is he basically classifies humans into certain archetypes or groups of characteristics, and there's about 8 of them. And generally, if you sort of can link the personality of a player to one of these archetypes, he gives you really good insights on how to win that player over or to get the most out of that player. So I do have a PDF version of that book. So if anyone is interested in giving that a read, I can make that available to you guys. Just give me a shout on the group. I'll post a link to that book on the WhatsApp group. But yeah, Rian, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Awesome. Moving on to our 4th topic. It's regarding athletes of varying ability within a group. So I'm going to ask Rogan comments. Rogan, can you just give us a brief introduction as to your background, and then we'll fire straight into the question.
Hi, what's happening, guys? So my name's Rogan. I'm a strength and conditioning coach at Westville Boys High School. I used to work there with Miles, funnily enough. That's how we met. I was his assistant, and then he moved on to better things into Sandton Joburg, and I took over his position. And during lockdown, we actually started Merck Athletic Development, which is an athletic development company. And I've continued to stay working at Westville Boys High and now run the department. Yeah, so basically that's a bit about me, but yeah, moving on to the question. I've broken the question down into kind of 2 parts. And as we unpack, I'll kind of get to answering both parts of the question. But firstly, how we manage working with athletes of varying ability. I think primarily we need to establish whether the gap between the athletes that have a really good ability and the athletes that have maybe a less of an ability is due to their actual ability to perform the workout or the session, or whether it's due to understanding. One of the previous speakers, I think a number of the previous speakers actually mentioned the education, whether it's educating your coaches or educating your boys. I think that goes a long way, encouraging the understanding of the workout or the session. Once we've established whether it's the athlete's actual ability that's halting their progression, or whether it's their understanding that's keeping them back from the rest of the group, then you can advance and move on to making the necessary changes. I think also we need to consider junior and senior athletes, because if we talk about our juniors, maybe our grade 8 and 9 athletes, for the most part, they don't have much experience in a gym or with strength and conditioning. And maybe the experience that they do have in the gym, if they do have any, is maybe with their father or a family member at Virgin Active, and it's not necessarily relative to their sport of choice. Whereas senior athletes, especially if they've been in a high performance group for a long period of time, they'll usually have a bit more experience, and therefore you begin to understand that maybe those that can't keep up in that senior setup, who have had, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years of experience in the gym, their issue is actually due to ability and not understanding, because you'd like to think that within the 4 years of them being a part of the program, that you've taught them enough to understand execution of the workout or the program, and they understand the why, like Miles mentioned earlier, and why it's necessary to perform or train in the way that you've prescribed them to train. What I often find that in the junior groups, you'll have 1 or 2 standouts, whereas in the senior groups, you'll have 1 or 2 that can't keep up. And I think that once you kind of identify those guys, and like I said earlier, once you understand the reason that they're either not keeping up or the reason that they're so far ahead of the rest of the group, then you can start making the necessary changes, because of course you don't want to isolate your athletes. I think your treatment and the language that you use with your boys is quite important, because the world is getting, for me, I think, a little bit unnecessarily sensitive at times. And you certainly don't want to isolate boys, whether it's for them performing too well or whether it's for them not performing well enough. You don't want to remove them from the session and give them a completely different session to do. You still want them to be integrated in with the rest of the team. So in order to include them still, you'll have to think of adequate regressions or progressions that'll still keep them a part of the team, doing the same or similar workouts, and not, you know, sticking to one side of the gym and not being able to, you know, interact with the rest of the team. Because obviously that is a big part of buy-in, is having the guys, you know, working as a team. You don't want them to be excluded from that group. They're not going to buy into the rest of what that team has, you know, the intimacy within that team. And then, like I mentioned, once you've understood the reason for their lack of, or their lack of ability, or whatever the case is, then you can go on to thinking about the methods in which you can take to challenge all the athletes in the squad to kind of be at the same ability. And I think that one of the biggest things for me is by educating your better athletes, or your athletes that have a much higher ability, and use them as coaches. I think a lot of the time an athlete that is maybe falling behind a bit, is a lot of the time you'll see that they're a little bit shy, maybe they're a little bit anxious, maybe that they're quite aware. Latis are very aware these days, and they'll definitely know if they're not keeping up. So if you kind of partner them up with athletes that are doing really well, and you teach your athletes that are really, really high level performers, you know, coaching points, cues, things like that, they can actually help the kid that's struggling a lot better than you may be able to do so if you don't necessarily have a relationship with that child in particular, in the way that one of his peers may have. I also think that this obviously is a lot easier to do if you have, you know, maybe 4 or 5 players that are standouts, or 4 or 5 players that are, or 4 or 5 athletes that are maybe not keeping up. You can have breakout groups. So that'll be a group of maybe of all the athletes that you've identified that maybe are either too good or not so good in this particular session. You can give them a session together, because you don't, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to exclude anyone or isolate anyone. So as long as there's a bit of a group, that often seems to help. And then I think also another good point is to give your athletes challenges and reachable goals. So for example, if the rest of your group is maybe moving on from a goblet squat into a barbell back squat because they've all, met the criteria that would allow them to move on. And, you've got a group of maybe 2 or 3 boys or athletes that can't progress. They're not able to execute a goblet squat to perfection, for 3 sets of 10 reps or whatever the case is. Give them a progression goal. So you say to them, okay, obviously a barbell is 20 kgs. If you can goblet squat a 20 kg dumbbell or kettlebell for 3 sets of 10 reps with perfect execution, obviously under your watchful eye, then we'll be okay with you moving on. So give them something to work towards, something that they can practice even in their own time, whether it means they practice doing some squats at home without a weight or whatever the case is. But as long as they have a realistic goal, a challenge that you've set for them, that then the outcome and the reward for that challenge is to move on with the rest of the group, I think that's quite a useful tool. And then obviously, you've just got to understand like adequate or applicable progression and regression exercises. So if you know, you obviously, if a athlete is not ready to progress well enough to the level of the rest of his team or group, or her team or group, and you may actually need to regress, you want to know the next step back or the next step forward. You don't want to take them too far back, or when they're progressing too far forward, because that actually ends up having like a negative reaction. Like if a athlete is doing normal body weight squats, you don't want to put them straight onto a back squat. The gap between the two is maybe too big. Or if they're struggling with a back squat, don't take them all the way back to a body weight squat. Maybe take them to a goblet squat or a rack squat or a bag squat or something like that. Regressing too far or progressing too far often has a far worse reaction or response. I think I've covered everything that I had written down or jotted down. I think that it is quite a broad topic, and I think like who was it that said earlier? Lawrence, I think, said what's the answer? Well, it depends. So I think it is very dependent on the environment in which the athlete is training, the reason for the training, the why. But yeah, I think some of the points that I've made are things that I've used, because I work a lot with the junior and the senior athletes. So there's always a kind of level that they've got to progress on, a line that they've got to stick to when they progress, as they go through the age groups and through the different challenges and different levels of performance that they're going to go through. And these are the methods that I've mentioned are methods that I've used in the past that seem to have done the trick.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rogues. Some really good insight through experience, lots of years working with you, and I tend to agree with most of that stuff. One thing I really liked that you mentioned is pairing guys together as training partners. So often you have the dynamics of a training group and you have sort of your little separations. Obviously, when you're trying to create your buy-in, culture goes along with that. And I think that pairing certain athletes together really does help create a good dynamic within your squad. It creates a cool little vibe. And I think like little things like we used to do is on a certain day, you'll give each guy in the squad a chance to be on music duty. They have to add their playlist or they have to bring their playlist. So everyone sort of has a chance to sort of show what they got. And I think it just creates a really good vibe as a whole. Guys, does anybody else have any input onto the stuff that Rogues has just said? Go for it, Lawrence.
Yeah, it's interesting to see we've all got a very similar viewpoint with when you're creating that buy-in with the program. I like your progression and regression comments. It's in your experience, how do you get them to stick to it? Because we're trying to educate them as best as possible that they make their correct choices when they're in the Virgin Active, when we don't have them in our control. Because 90% of kids, the first thing they're going to do is going to be a horizontal press, and they're going to go bench press, dumbbell bench press, incline dumbbell bench press, and then
it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because today we're in an off-season phase at the moment, and there are some boys that are using the gym, but a lot of the guys are actually resting. I'm speaking with regards to our rugby boys at the moment, but one of them, he was doing a bench press, and he like kept adding weights as the sets went on, but he was adding like 10 and 20 at a time. So I'm like, bud, why are you adding so much weight as you go? And he says, no, I'm doing 12 reps, then 10 reps, then 8 reps, then 6 reps. And I was like, why are you doing that? And then he's like, yeah, and afterwards I'm doing incline chest press, and then I'm doing dips. And I'm just thinking, like, buddy, where, if you were at Virgin Active, no one would have been having this conversation with you, and you'd have been just smashing it, absolutely destroying the pecs. But it is a tough one to deal with. I'm lucky in the sense that I haven't dealt with that too much. We are very privileged in the sense that at the school we've actually got 3 training facilities. So we have one. It's like the old gym. We've kept it a gym, and at the moment it's open to the rest of the school, where we have another strength and conditioning coach who like pretty much runs the gym, and he lets the boys train how they want to. But if he sees something like that, he'll step in and try and educate the boys a bit more. So I think the fact that we have 3 or 4 guys that are speaking the same thing into the boys' ears, it helps them to learn it a bit more freely. Whereas if it was one person telling them one thing and then 10 people on Instagram telling them another thing on how to grow your pecs or your deltoids, they'd listen to the Instagram trainer as opposed to their trainer at the school. I think because when they go from the recreational gym at school that they've been given the privilege of using, and then coming to the sessions that are scheduled for them, they're being told the same thing throughout. So I think we're in a place where we're a bit luckier than maybe other schools where they've only got 1 S&C coach or 2 S&C coaches who don't have the opportunity to speak to them as much. But yeah, I don't know. I've got to give it a bit of thought if I'm going to have to give you an answer that I'd need to think of. But yeah, I think obviously the understanding is a massive thing, and you've mentioned trust a number of times. I think if they trust you and you've got them results in the past, they're going to back you, and they're going to back your opinion. There's been cases, I mean, not to toot my own horn, I mean, I'm not using a lot of the 4 kgs of muscle packed on. He's going to trust you a lot more in the next phase, because he knows that you've been able to help him pack on some weight, which is what he wanted.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rogues, for that. So guys, just in summary, I think the cool thing that I've seen tonight is that there are a lot of similarities in the way that we view things. What I would like to see in the future is if we can jot down some kind of a basic structure that people could refer to. Obviously, everyone wants to put their little, their sort of pass on the basics, but it's really pleasing to see that we all have a lot of similarities in the way we view things. So going forward, later in the month, we are looking at, I've spoken to Andy Edwards, the head of athletic performance for the Springboks. Obviously, he's been in Australia and he's been quite busy, but we're going to look at doing a Q&A with him towards the end of the month. I've just got to try and lock down a time with him after the Argentinian test. So I will keep you all updated with that. I will document and jot down a few points on the summaries of this, and I will make that YouTube video available. But guys, I think I've learned a lot from, and it's been great seeing different opinions. I mean, there is you can have the black and white, but it's always nice to see people's opinions on how they view things and how they implement the basics. So yeah, guys, thank you so much to everyone that's spoken, everyone that's contributed, and to everyone that's listened in tonight. Yeah, I think we've got onto something really good here, and yeah, let's keep thinking out the box. If anyone has ideas on, I know obviously we've done the group here. I do have a list of things that that we can speak about in the future, besides getting people to speak about specific topics. If something that has sparked in you in terms of what you think we can address in the future, yeah, please contact me. But guys, I think we over an hour now, so we're going to wrap it up. But thank you so much. Also, thank you to our sponsors, LifeMax and Harvest Table, for providing the little protein shake giveaway. And yeah, we will keep in touch, and I look forward to chatting to you guys soon. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, James.
Well, just
Thanks,
on that,
Marlo.
thanks to you for setting it up.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Marlo.
Cheers, gents. All the best.